Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. The pandemic saw a surge in the number of people starting their business or setting up a side hustle. But many small businesses overlook the importance of branding. Branding represents your public identity and credibility, so it's pretty important to get it right. Today, we're getting a masterclass in branding from someone who does it every day. Jye Smith is the founder and managing director of brand agency Doublestar. Jye, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Thanks very much for having me.
So what is branding in really simple language? It's a lot more than a logo.
Yeah, it's a collection of how your business comes to life. The way we generally talk about brand is the things that make up your business as a whole experience. So what it looks like, obviously everyone looks at logos and looks at slogans, and that's very easy, but it's also the way your brand or business behaves. And so we often treat brands as verbs rather than nouns. So it's a collection of the things it does, the things it says, the tone, the style, the language, everything from your website to the very culture inside your building.
Okay, so then it reminds me of a great example when I was working at Fairfax and we were transferring basically from print to digital. One of the great examples someone gave me was National Geographic and the yellow hue around stories and certainly typeface and how they present themselves and things like that. But it's kind of what I'm using that example simply because I think you think that yellow hue around National Geographic, it evokes an emotion in you. You know what it stands for.
It does. And that emotion or that nostalgia that we now feel about National Geographic comes as a result of its history and its heritage. If you look really deeply at that frame, what it's doing is it's speaking much more to putting the world into view. It's about putting things into perspective. It's about giving you insight and vision into the world around you. And they're the things that National Geographic represent and the things that the brand allows you to do. And to say that's just a color and just a logo is really dismissive. It's quite minimalist in actually thinking about the power behind an organization or a brand like that.
Okay, so where do I start? So let's say I've just started a small business. How do I figure out my brand?
Where we like to start is speaking to what you want your brand to mean to your customers. And when we talk about meaning, we think of that as a collection of what your customers need to think, feel, and do when they come in touch with your brand. So it might be about evoking an emotion. It might be about enabling something they couldn't do before. It might be about value. It might be about expertise. And it might even be about entertainment. But at its core, what is the purpose of your brand and why does it exist is where we like to start. And that can get very fluffy and it can get very airy-fairy. But if you sell sliding doors, and I've got a local example around where I grew up in Sans Souci, you want your sliding doors to work like magic. Mm-hmm. And so this guy has a brilliant van called Wizard Sliding Doors. I've never met him. I just look at his van every day. And it's got a great big wizard on it. And I'm like, it's such a great feeling to think that he didn't take himself too seriously. He knew what his customers wanted. And if you put a great big wizard on the side of your sliding glass van door, then people are going to take notice.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a test. Fear and Greed. Our whole goal is to educate, to actually talk about business news in an accessible way. So people listen to it once, hear it, think, I understand that. But the purpose of what we do is to better inform people. How do we think about that as a brand?
So where I would start is I would take exactly what you've said and put it into 3 buckets. The first bucket is relevance. So you're making the news accessible. That's very relevant to me. Then the second bucket would be credibility. And I'd spend some time asking, well, why are you guys the source people should come to engage about these sorts of insights? And the third one's the most important. What makes it distinctive? And what are you guys doing that no one else is doing? And then literally we wrap those 3 areas up of credibility, relevance, and distinctiveness. And then we say, what image does this evoke? What song does this evoke? What color does this evoke? And we work around those things to come up with what we call like brand concepts, which are the territories that your brand might engage with. And from that, we then work with designers to visualize that. So it's exactly what you said, put into a framework. And you got to remember, frameworks just frame the work. So you guys have already done all that. We're simply taking that and applying a new lens to it.
Okay. Is it about, I'm just trying to decide, is it about finding our point of difference or is it about finding what we're best at, which may not actually be a point of difference?
Exactly. And that's why those 3 I think about them as rings. I realize I'm
Yep.
just about to draw on the air on a podcast. But your relevance and credibility, that's what you do and why you do it better. But your distinctiveness is how you do it differently.
Yep.
There's something that we look at in brand that doesn't apply to other marketing disciplines. And the first one is to almost ignore your customer, because being salient or being novel or being different is far more powerful than being meaningful. And people get quite upset when they hear that sometimes. Like, yeah, but, it's about how much work we've done, all these great things that, I can do and I can achieve. But if nobody takes notice, then it doesn't matter. And we live in a world now where most of our brand interactions happen on 5 inches of glass in our hand, in amongst friends, family,
Yep.
and 1,000 Instagram messages. So once you've got someone's attention, then it's really important to get their interest. But without attention, then it's rather meaningless. So I would always bet on being novel and being different versus being credible and being relevant within reason.
Yeah. So what about competitors? How, if we're Fear and Greed and we have a bunch of competitors and some of them are very good, how should we think about our competitors? I say that with gritted teeth. Don't worry, Jye.
Yeah, there are two schools of thought. There's the Jeff Bezos, ignore your competition and do what you're good at. And obviously you can't fault him for winning at that. But I would probably advocate for something a little more assertive or a little more aggressive. I would be, take a line out of, I think it's called Zag, another book, where whatever your customers are doing, do it differently. So there's a point of difference. So I would look at your competition. And if you look up, business podcasts, there's quite a number of them. And you might be looking for the host, which is, in our experience, is typically the biggest point of difference from podcast to podcast. Or it might be about tone. Some people hate waffle. Some people love waffle. I've listened to a bunch of your guys' episodes, and it's so to the point. It's really direct. It's very digestible, and that's great for certain modes of transport. But I tell you, I will settle down and listen to 2 hours of waffle before I get into a real podcast sometimes, and it drives my girlfriend nuts. But that, for me, is a point of difference I like. I like the stories. I like the emotion. I like the chitter-chatter.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't. And so that's where I would apply the customer lens to that.
Stay with me, Jye. We'll be back in a minute. I'm speaking to Jye Smith, founder and managing director of brand agency Doublestar Co. Back to brand. How much does it need to evolve? I mean, I'm back to the National Geographic. That probably has evolved over time, but only minimally in my mind. I might be 100% wrong there. Presumably brands do have to evolve.
They do, but there's two evolutions. People, when they talk about evolution, they're generally talking about what it looks like. And the National Geographic has gone through changes, but its iconic yellow frame really hasn't. But I know they've changed font probably 9 or 8 times over the years.
Wow.
And, I'm thinking back to, I think the 80s is probably the first magazines I would have picked up as a kid. But it's changed a lot, but that frame has always been a core part of their identity. Does it need to be updated? Probably not. But it's very hard to convince a new business that they should go with something simple and minimal day one. We all get excited about our business. We all want to make it amazing. And we probably over-tinker with things visually. What brands need to do from an evolution point of view is look at, well, what is the experience we're shaping and designing? And do those things need to update? I stayed in the Avolo Hotel recently, and it was down in Canberra. It was an exceptional experience. Every single physical touch point, digital touch point was really well thought through and very modern. Now, that was very relevant to me today, nearly 40, staying somewhere that, is nice for a couple of nights, in Canberra. That was great. But that used to be the W Hotel's signature because they did everything really cheeky and different. And now being cheeky and different is kind of annoying in a hotel, whereas I think Avolo got it right by being more art-led, being more culture-led, rather than being different for the sake of being different. And I think that's a maturity that they had to apply because the world has kind of grown up in the last 10 years faster than anyone could have imagined. So there's a maturity there they needed to reflect.
We've been talking about a brand in terms of essentially selling goods and services. What about internally and the importance of a brand internally and how culture fits into it?
We really see culture as a reflection and as well as an inception of brand. So for us, we really break brands down into the rituals, behaviors, language, and taxonomies, even things down to the way things are signposted inside a office or organization. the materials you use, all those physical touch points. But it does come down to culture in terms of, as I mentioned, language. How do you speak to each other? What digital tools do you use to engage? Are you remote? Are you hybrid? Are you in the office? All those things should be a reflection of your brand. So if you're about openness and integrity, then you should make sure those things are built into your culture. And I don't mean them, as big, happy, clappy signing on the walls, that we also saw in the 80s with motivation written across and somebody standing on the top of a mountain. I mean, we need to do things that are built into people's KPIs so they know that if they can have more open and honest conversations with their clients about something or with each other or be candid about feedback, then those things are actually going to contribute to their performance as an individual, their recognition as an employee, and a greater meaning or a greater contribution they're making to the organization. And typically what we say is many people are aware of their job title in an organization, but much fewer, or sometimes very few at all, aren't aware of their role within an organization. And that difference between role and job title can't be overstated because it is a point of difference. And if you've got the right kind of culture, people understand those two things.
Jye, we're totally out of time, but there is one question I do have to ask you, which is kind of a bit removed. So at Doublestar Co, you're quite happy to invest, or in some cases invest in your team's side hustles. What's that about? How's that work?
So we're quite a young team. Like I started this at 33 or 34, I guess I was. I can't remember now. It's bad. 33. And everyone we brought in was like 22, 23 because, we were trying to be young and cool. I think we're still young and cool. I get to say that.
I'm old and cool for the record, Jye.
But, everyone who comes in always had a passion on the side. And it was always the first question we asked them, like, what do you do when you leave work? And a lot of them had these dreams in fashion and streetwear and in art where they wanted to do things like start a potting studio or start a sneaker gallery. And I said to them, I want you to bring that passion and energy just as deep into work as you do as your side hustle. So what we did was we committed to each of them a monetary and a time commitment from the business back to them, completely no strings, so that they could go and live and breathe those different dreams they've got. Because I don't believe side hustles should be about the side. I think they should be about what you do when you're awake and you're in the day, not something you're working away at night, because that for us is the sign of a truly curious, ambitious and motivated person. And that's what we want to foster inside of Doublestar Co.
That's a great initiative. Jye, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you.
That was Jye Smith, founder and managing director of brand agency Doublestar Co. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.